project, task 4, drafting your questions. So we're going to need to create our questionnaire so that you can actually gather the information you want to find out about. Remember, we are trying to limit ourselves to one variable, so we're going to kind of ask the same question in a lot of different ways, or ask about different aspects of the same opinion. You will need to ask at least one demographic question. If you do more, you can, but remember, the more options you give for demographic questions, then the more information you're going to need to parse later. The more measurements that you're going to need to do in your results section, and that means more writing in the discussion section. Sorry, a cat just jumped in my lap. But when asking your demographic question, think about how are the individuals in your population of interest similar, and how might they be different, and how will that affect your variable. If you're surveying the whole school, you might want to use class or grade level as your demographic question. But if you're only surveying part of the school, you may want to ask about gender, early late birthdays, something like that. But again, be careful when asking demographic questions, because you don't want to just ask them when they kind of have nothing to do with whatever main variable you're looking at. Because again, it also creates more work for you later if you get more demography in here. You should focus on your 8 data gathering questions. Each data gathering question needs to be multiple choice, and actually your demographic questions should probably also be multiple choice so that you can limit the number of subgroups that you're going to get. Your multiple choice answers should sort of be in order from either, not necessarily in order, but they should have a feeling of strongest to weakest, or most to least, or something like that, so that, how strongly do you feel, how much would you agree, how much would you disagree, things like that. Each question needs to directly ask about some aspect of your main topic for the survey project. So, you've had some time to do some brainstorming and thinking about that, so let's see what your example project looks like. So again, we're going back to the same Google Doc as before. And I forgot to say before that when you share it, make sure that you copy your link so that you can submit it on Canvas. So now we're explaining how our survey is being done. That is part of our methods. So again, kind of explaining the whole thing over and over and over again. And it's a paragraph, so let's indent. In this project, we are investigating the topic of student opinions about homework loads at MA. Nice and repetitive, fun, boring writing that makes it look like you said a lot. In fact, we can even copy and paste sometimes. We will select our respondents by choosing a simple random sample of 15 juniors and 15 seniors from Mr. Q's classes. Now, this actually ended up kind of being a convenient sample because I should have sampled the whole school. Or I should have narrowed my population of interest. I should narrow my population of interest to juniors and seniors in my classes, because that's really only who I checked. And again, you might remember that some of you had one survey and some of you had the other survey. That's because those of you who had my survey about homework loads were randomly selected in a simple random sample of all of my juniors versus all of my seniors. I actually did a stratified random sample for that. It's actually all of my classes. And since it was stratified, juniors and seniors as strata. Again, you need to say how everybody is getting to your project and how you're going to get at least 30 responses. So we are all publishing via Google Forms. Everybody needs to have that in their methods. In order to get at least 30 responses, by publishing an assignment on Canvas. Now remember, we're trying to eliminate bias. We're trying not to overestimate or underestimate certain results. But again, bias will happen. I've already mentioned that I am kind of taking a convenient sample a little bit by only looking at students in my classes, not just 15 randomly selected juniors and 15 randomly selected seniors from the entire school. So we also need to acknowledge that in our writing. This is, again, part of our methods, part of how we're investigating, and part of how we're trying to get better. So we anticipate that bias will occur because students have strong feelings about homework based on their most recent experiences. So their responses may be skewed if someone had a particularly heavy or light homework load the previous night. These are things that I thought about as I was doing the methods before I started getting results from you guys, so I can't actually go back in time and change how I wrote it or how I intended to do it. But I am making these ideas, or I'm keeping those ideas for my conclusions later. You know, redefine population of interest. The students in my classes, maybe I should do that. Not necessarily this project, but this kind of work. So these are all things that I noticed in hindsight. That's why they go in my conclusions. Maybe skewed if and we will try to eliminate that bias by randomly selecting students from each class year and wording our questions differently in order to get something closer to their true opinions. Don't just ask one question, ask the question multiple times in multiple ways. But it's still, at its core, the same question. Okay. And now, again, the last part of our methods is looking at exactly what our questions are And we are going to also need to interpret these and put them into a histogram. Again, the process for our scoring key that is going to come up for how we score each of these is pretty close to what we have in the histogram stuff. So we'll review that a little bit later as well. But you need your demographic questions and data gathering questions. So rather than bore you by typing this in over and over again, I will kind of just jump ahead. And look. At the early version of this that I did, where so do you have any advanced standing or AP classes? Yes or no. So that's one set of demographic questions. So I'm going to have to look at students who do have AS or AP classes versus students who don't. Also, I looked at junior versus senior, so that's two more groups. And actually, I need to start mixing and matching a little bit because I asked each of those. So I need to see if there's juniors in AS or AP, if they're any different from juniors who aren't, versus seniors in AS or AP versus seniors who aren't, to see if their opinions are different. And I have to look at the overall. So that kind of puts me at 9 sets of calculations that I'm going to have to do because I asked 2 demographic questions that had 2 options. Now, in your Google form, you're not going to put the numbers next to everything. You might notice that that wasn't in mine, but I am putting my point values for each answer. So how do you feel about your nightly homework load? I kind of decided ahead of time that 1 is going to be a low opinion of homework, and 5 is going to be a high opinion of homework, even if I'm asking about different types of outcomes or different aspects of the homework. So if I have far too much, then I probably don't like it. I could do with less. It's a little bit less. That's a 2, all the way up to I cannot get enough homework. I love homework. That's a 5. But how you feel in general is going to be a little bit different about how much do you learn from it. So if you feel like, yeah, I've got too much, but I learn a bunch, those two things might balance each other out. So I learn a ton and I find it very helpful is still a 5, going all the way down to I learn nothing from the homework and it doesn't help me at all. So 2 different ways of asking, how do you feel about homework? Do you feel it helps you, or do you just feel good or bad? Is it the amount of homework? How do you feel about review assignments? Do they actually help, or are they just kind of extra things that are there to get in your way? So again, 5s, my answers are generally, I feel pretty good about homework. 4s are a little bit less positive. 3s are neutral, all the way down to 1s are negative feelings about homework. That was my one variable that I was looking at. And again, I just asked a bunch of similar questions about different aspects of homework from everybody. You don't have to make the scoring key yet. Again, we're going to go over that later, but this is going to be how I set up my histogram in the future about, general student opinions. I think we're probably going to have neutral feelings, but we'll find out.